From the McCourtney Institute for Democracy on the campus of Penn State University, I'm Michael Berkman.
And I'm Chris Beam, and this is Democracy Works.
Chris, today we have a special guest. All our guests are special, but
yeah, but in this case, it's in our interest to say so.
But so today we have the Provost of the university,
That's
Nick
right.
Jones, is here to talk with us about the role of land-grant universities.
Right, and more broadly, just the kind of the role of higher education in a democracy, and we've had some indications that this is a particularly salient issue right now, right?
Yeah. So one reason we wanted to invite the provost in is that we've been talking among ourselves by recent polls, which have shown really, I think, significant declines in support for higher education among Americans, and what you might think of as a partisan polarization of support.
Mm-hmm. Right. There's just a different understanding of the role of higher education in a democratic society.
Yeah, and this, of course, accompanies many years now of declining financial support for many state universities across the country, including Penn State's had its issues too, mostly stemming from the 2008-2009 recession,
and even before that. I mean, and I think this goes back decades, and I think you're right to say that the decline of state support for higher education, is essentially the same kind of understanding of how much you value it, right? If you're not valuing it, you don't want to pay for it.
Right. And then also, and we've also seen measures coming out of state legislatures in various states that have sought to put different kinds of tuition rates on people doing different kinds of majors, just all kinds of issues that have come up that really lead us to think maybe it's a good time to talk about the role of public universities in a democracy. Maybe we ought to take a step back and just kind of explain what a land-grant university is.
So a land-grant university, it was an act, the Morrill Act, signed by Abraham Lincoln in 1862 that offered land for free to states if they would use it to create universities and colleges that were designed to bring education to professions that didn't normally have them, right?
It was the democratization of
Right.
higher education. Mm-hmm. And the public interest at that time was very much agriculture. We're starting to industrialize. And it seems to me like a recognition on the part of the federal government at the time that we needed to do more to help the country move forward.
The other part of that was that you wanted to make sure that all people in a democracy had some fundamental education in order to perform well their roles as citizens.
Democracy requires an informed citizen.
Right.
There's no
Right.
national American university, so every state was going to develop this in their own way.
And now every state in the union has at least one. And Pennsylvania, the Penn State University system is the only land-grant university. And there's 24 campuses. There's a law school, the med center. They're all out under that same umbrella. And part of what makes this climate so much more complicated, in addition to just the rise of technology and all that stuff, is this idea that the partisanization of American life has impacted higher education as well. Now that we as a society see higher education in these transactional terms, that you pay us money, we give you a credential that allow you to make more money. So I think that is a sufficient laying out of what the issues are that are on the table right now, and why we thought it was worth bringing in the provost to talk about it. So let's hear what he has to say.
Okay, let's bring in Jenna.
This is Jenna Spinelli here today with Penn State Provost Nick Jones. Nick, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
So before we dive into the topic of higher education and democracy, I'm wondering if you could just take a minute and briefly explain to us what a provost does. I think a lot of us in the McCourtney Institute and involved in this show are very entrenched in the world of higher education, but many of our listeners might not be. So can you tell us what your role is as provost?
Sure. So I actually have two roles at Penn State. I am the executive vice president, which means I'm the backup to President Barron, sort of his right hand if he is indisposed. I'm the default go-to person. As provost, I am the chief academic officer for the university, so am ultimately responsible for all things academic, which of course includes the academic welfare of almost 100,000 students, faculty responsibilities. The deans of the colleges all report to me. And at Penn State, I'm also responsible for the institutional budget. So I get involved in a lot of institutional operations that also support the core academic mission. So really, as provost, I have a hand in almost every aspect of university operation.
Thinking specifically about land-grant institutions, they have been called in the past democracy's colleges. So places where people from all walks of life can come together to learn how to solve the world's problems. You know, we're not in the ivory tower, so to speak. We're not kind of elite institutions. Colleges for the people. That term was published in the 40s. I'm wondering, in your view, if that kind of still holds true today in 2018.
Yes, absolutely. I believe that is the case. There are many things that are necessary to make a democracy work. One of the important aspects that often is not talked about but is vital is we need to have an educated citizenry. They need to be able to understand issues, to think about issues, to engage around topics in an informed way, and to be able to think deeply about many of these areas. As a land-grant university, and more specifically as Pennsylvania's land-grant university, part of our mission of service to the citizens of the Commonwealth is to ensure that we're doing everything we can do to ensure that they do represent that educated citizenry. Now, of course, even with 24 campus locations across the Commonwealth, we can't reach every person in every corner, although some would argue that through our World Campus we can. But we don't touch everybody in the Commonwealth, but we touch a large number of people, both directly as students and indirectly through our extension and many other outreach operations.
I know that the university has its own health system. We operate daycare centers, concert venues, all types of things that are not directly related to education. So how do those aspects fit into that land-grant mission and then kind of into that broader democratic mission?
Yeah, so I would put those, the things that you described, into several buckets. So a health system, for example. We have a pretty profound service mission to the Commonwealth. Perhaps in 1865, health wasn't one of the things that was specifically identified, but in 2018, contributing to the health and well-being of as many people as we're able to touch, we do consider to be an important part of our mission as an institution. When it comes to things like, concert venues, a core part of our land-grant mission was to provide a liberal arts context, and we effect that through a number of means. But one way is exposing the citizens of the Commonwealth to the arts, the visual arts, the performing arts, and so one can argue that facilitating concert events, making them available to people across the Commonwealth, or certainly in the catchment of a particular campus, is an important contribution to that mission.
And what does that kind of back and forth look like as the university is considering taking on a new initiative, a new program, a new service? How do you kind of consider, where how it fits in that mission versus, say, the financial return that might come from taking on something new?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I think it is really important that we stay laser focused on our mission as a university. And if I had my druthers every morning when I would get up, the first thing I would do is just reread the mission statement of the university to make sure that when I come to work, I am adhering to that mission. Truly, that is the lens through which I make a lot of decisions. Is this central to the mission of the university? That mission of the land-grant university, which is incredibly powerful, still 160 years after we were founded, and that is a mission of research in the public good, a mission of teaching the citizens of the Commonwealth and in 2018 beyond, and a mission of service. So that is the core lens through which I think we view all of our actions and responsibilities. Obviously, if everything were black and white, it would be easy. There are some things that are probably a little more in the gray, but I would say that we always try to come around and look at those and say, when you blow away all of the chaff, is this important to our mission as Pennsylvania's land-grant university? If the answer is yes, we do it. If the answer is no, we don't.
And the other kind of piece to this puzzle that funding from the state has, for not just for Penn State, but for other state university systems, has been flat or maybe even declined in some cases. So how does that change the calculus?
Yes, so over time, most public institutions in the land have seen a reduction in state support. And what that has meant is that a larger share of the cost of tuition is borne by students and their families. I think back when this first started to happen, it was okay because tuition was pretty cheap, and still a large portion of the costs were covered by basically direct appropriations from, in our case, the Commonwealth. But as over time, as that's continued to evolve and the support has declined, it's still substantial support that we do get from the Commonwealth, and we're very grateful for that. And the burden on students and their families has crept up. I think we really have become much more mindful about the financial impact, and we spend a good amount of time thinking about how do we ensure that a Penn State education remains accessible to people all across the Commonwealth from all different walks of life and affordable. And by affordable, we mean that we pay attention to things like what is the median student debt of our graduates. That's an important number for us. Back decades ago, this wasn't something that nobody ever had to talk about because the numbers were just small, but we realize the impact, and it's something that we really focus on now more than ever before, I think.
Yeah. Do you get the sense that from the students' perspective, things have changed in terms of seeing a degree as more of a credential, perhaps, something, a path on the way toward a job as opposed to maybe something that is a little bit more in service of the public good?
I think we pay attention. I'm a little biased because I'm an engineer, and so when I graduated with my engineering degree, it had not only had I experienced a well-rounded education, I was also prepared to design things. But I think across all of our programs, we are mindful of the fact that, one, we are preparing students or graduates for life, and we're also preparing them for a career. So I think we are thoughtful about ensuring that our education or the education we offer our students during their time with us prepares them for both in a balanced way. And that means, in some majors, We encourage our students to take additional courses so that when they graduate, they can channel the things they have learned in perhaps a less, shall we say, vocationally oriented discipline. They can channel that learning through the other vehicles that they have been exposed to a career. And so I think we do think about that a lot, and we want our graduates to be successful across the spectrum of their lives, both in their personal lives as individuals and citizens, and in their professional lives as well.
The other thing that we tend to hear a lot about in kind of the circles that we travel in as a Democracy Institute is a trend toward anti-intellectualism, people kind of devaluing a college education, or maybe encouraging people to go a different way, or thinking about it's a traditional liberal education is maybe being conflated with a politically liberal education.
Mm-hmm.
Those types of things. What's your sense of that? Are you hearing those things from kind of your position, and if so, how does Penn State kind of handle those conversations?
Yes, well, we of course we hear that a lot. Sometimes we hear it. Sometimes people tell us that. My reaction would be we are really committed to educating our students for their lives ahead. A large number of our students are traditionally aged 18 to 22-year-olds. Increasingly, many of our students are older. They're either going to college later because they had other things to do early in life, or they served in the military, or whatever reason. They just didn't come in at that sort of traditional age, and so we serve many adult learners as well. But we're always focused on preparing those students when they graduate for the lives that are ahead of them, really across the board. We fundamentally believe that educating people so that they can think, be analytical, and thoughtful when confronted with the types of situations that life brings, either personally or professionally, is really important. So we fundamentally believe in the value of an educated citizenry. Obviously for democracy in the context of this conversation, but just in general, the ability for people to have critical thinking skills and be able to analyze and process all of the complexity that the world throws at us. We think it's just vitally important.
Do you worry that higher education is going to get, or maybe already has gotten caught up in some of the partisanship and polarization that has crept into other facets of life?
Yes, I worry about it a lot. I would think it's fair to say we worry about it a lot. My colleagues at Penn State, my fellow provosts at other institutions, we all worry about that. However, wringing our hands doesn't really achieve anything. I think it's a case where we need to take responsibility for what is happening. Why is that happening? And how is it that we can be cast in perhaps not as favorable a light as we used to be? And probably the piece that we need to own is we haven't done as good a job as we should have in making the case to the public that higher education does offer value to society, and it is really important, and we make meaningful, even profound contributions to the betterment of everyone. I don't think we often do that as well as we should. I don't think it's often as front of mind as it might be, and we don't communicate as effectively as we should to, for example, the citizens of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Obviously, our students feel very positively about how they've been impacted, but there are many people who are not graduates of Penn State. We need to make sure that we are reaching them as well. And probably one of the best examples I can give where I think we have been successful is in agriculture. And I saw this firsthand a couple of years ago when there were hearings in Harrisburg that were about the appropriation for Penn State and the other state-related universities. And in that particular, it was a difficult budget year, and there was some consideration being given to what, if any, appropriation the institution would get. And so I went down, testified, president did, others. But some of the most powerful advocates for Penn State were our colleagues from the agricultural community. Why? Because for 160 years, Penn State has really focused on making sure that we are providing excellent service to the agricultural community in the Commonwealth, and we are helping them do their jobs and support their industry better. And in fact, in some areas, I think Pennsylvania is a national leader or one of the national leaders because of that support that they have been provided by Penn State agriculture through our extension program. This is an amazing success story, and I think that community really understands, and we have over time placed a premium on getting information that people in that sector need in order to do their jobs better, and making sure that we are communicating well about what we do. When we do that, people get it. I think we can do that in other areas as well, and perhaps haven't been as effective as we might have been.
Yeah, like what? What are some other areas that kind of on your list to go to, or places or people you feel aren't hearing that message?
Well, I think if you look, obviously in places like engineering, it's a little bit easier to make the case because engineering generally produces products or outcomes that are tangible. But in some areas like science, here at Penn State, we have some amazing faculty in fabulous science departments. And people all around the world know how great the work is that they are doing. But I worry that if we go 10 miles from University Park, there are probably people who don't necessarily know the types of discoveries that are being made and why, more importantly, why those discoveries ultimately are important to them. And it's not always these can be complex issues, and it's not always easy to explain. But it's our responsibility it's our responsibility, not theirs, to ensure that those explanations are provided.
I'm just going to close with our 4 Mood of the Nation poll questions. Thinking specifically about American politics, what makes you angry?
I think the divisiveness that I see across the country. This is a great country founded on great principles, and really has been successful because of a pursuit of a common good, and it's very frustrating to feel the degree of divisiveness that exists, and I hope we can find ways to move past that.
Right. We might come back to that here in a question or two. What makes you proud?
The accomplishments of the United States are pretty amazing. There's lots of examples I could give, but on a recent trip, I was stuck in Houston for a day. So rather than waste the day, I got a rental car, and my wife and I went to the Johnson Space Center, and we only had a couple of hours there, but we made the best of it. And I think because we only had a couple of hours, we had to walk quickly. So we walked through the display that sort of chronicles the space program from its genesis to present day. And as you walk through that, and as we did quickly, it's pretty extraordinary what this country can achieve when everybody focuses on a single vision and sets their minds to it. That makes me proud.
Right. What makes you worry?
I do worry that because of the degree of divisiveness, we see that our democracy is strained. I'm a big believer in democracy. And all people contributing to the advancement of democratic principles. I was born and raised my home country is New Zealand. It was the first country to give women the vote. So I grew up in a place that really embraces ensuring that everybody has access and ability to influence governance. One feels the stress and the strain to which we're subjected now in this unusually divisive era, and I worry.
And then finally, what gives you hope?
Oh, the resilience of people, and at the end of the day, nobody said that this was going to be easy, right? This is in order to form a more perfect union. So nobody said it was a linear path. Nobody said it was a path where we wouldn't have sort of step off from time to time or have setbacks that would get in the way. But we need to be focused on the future, and I ultimately believe in the vision and the power of people to go to where they need to go.
Great. Perfect words to end on, so we'll leave it there. Provost Jones, thank you so much for your time today.
You're very welcome. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you, Jenna, and thank you to the provost. Those were, I thought, really thoughtful and interesting answers. I mean, there were a lot of different things that he talked about that touch back on ours, and he certainly emphasizes that they keep a laser focus on the mission of the university, and that the mission of the university remains that of a land-grant college, and
right.
that the country has gotten much more complex, and therefore what the university does is a lot more complex than it was, but it's still serving in the public interest. It's still trying to create good democratic citizens.
And it is doing that in a climate where it's far more difficult to make the books balance, right?
Right. So the public commitment is significantly different now than it was in the past.
Right.
And so that has made the job of a provost tougher, because you need to find the revenues from somewhere.
Right.
And the more that actually universities get wrapped up in partisan battles, I think the more difficult it will be to extract revenues out of the state legislatures. And I'll say a little bit more about that, when a state legislature is confronted with a challenging economic environment, higher education is one of the easier things to cut by what's coming from the state legislature. But of course, having students from out of state, having international students benefits the entire university. I mean, it's a tension that they have to do. They have to balance it. You have to make sure that you're still serving the students of Pennsylvania,
which is your mission.
But bringing in strong students from elsewhere brings new perspectives in, offers a more diverse campus. It has benefits in itself.
That's all true, but I also think there's a he said this. There's a danger here, right? That because of these constraints on the bottom line, it is very difficult for anybody in a leadership position in any kind of university, land-grant or otherwise, to ignore the impact of any decision on the bottom line, right? And so you can say, at what point does the number of out-of-state students undermine the mission of the university? And at what point does creating a center that is more likely to generate revenue than one that isn't? I mean, all these, the burden of just making the books balance, is just ever present, and it is a very difficult thing for any university representative to balance that reality with this mission that goes back 150 years.
Yes, of course, we're a much more interconnected world than we used to be. So it would seem kind of odd to me to have an institution of higher education that didn't have people from all over the place. As we talked about throughout the discussion today, the mission of a land-grant university is multifold. And so one is, yes, to create these good democratic citizens, and it seems that the focus needs to be on the residents of Pennsylvania there. But it's also to address problems in the public interest, to address the public interest. And for that, people from all over can help.
Right, and benefit,
And
right?
benefit,
I mean,
yeah.
child maltreatment is not limited to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, nor is the opioid crisis, right? So whatever comes out of
Right,
Pennsylvania,
another area where
right.
where Penn State is really trying to focus
Right,
these
and
days.
so if anything that comes out of Pennsylvania is going to benefit outside of the borders of the state as well, and that's true for any major university.
And a large university like Penn State and others across the country can bring so many different perspectives onto something like the opioid crisis.
Sure.
But we were also talking to him as somebody who understands land-grant institutions more broadly.
And higher education in America more broadly. The only thing I would want to say is I was really encouraged and made me proud to hear him talk about how the university, any university, has a responsibility to develop skills of citizenship, critical thinking, analytical skills, learning how to assess an argument. The idea that that this is something that a democratic society can do without or take it or leave it just strikes me as just wrong.
Yeah.
And the fact that we, Penn State and other universities, are continue to see that as an essential part of their mission, I think is good for America.
Yes, I agree with that. I do have concern with where we started about how support for American universities is starting to polarize along partisan lines.
Right.
And I heard in the Provost's answers that he's got some concerns about that.
Sure. How can
as
you not?
well, and where that goes.
Right. And so it's not to say that these issues are obvious, but the essential dimension of higher education in terms of sustaining a democracy, I think that's something that both you and I would just just see as what's the word I'm looking for?
I don't know.
Indisputable.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it pays the bills.
Keeps us off the streets.
From the McCourtney Institute for Democracy, this has been Democracy Works. I'm Michael Berkman.
And I'm Chris Beam. Thanks very much for listening.